Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So, according to the latest the list by WHO, there are about 13,000 different human diseases. Right? What cause these diseases? Yeah. So there is infections, there are pollution, injuries, etc., etc. Right? What percentage of these diseases could be caused by our DNA errors? So, according to the latest study, more than 85% of human diseases are directly or indirectly linked to the errors in our DNA, which means we're all born with the natural cause of our death. Now, these diseases combinedly affect over 1 billion people globally, and India alone has got about 200 million such patients living with a genetic condition. Now, out of which, the heart conditions and cancers cause almost half of these conditions. Now, the interesting fact here that, like the way a Google map gives you a congestion or a hazard in the route and suggests us different paths, if we know that there is a genetic mutation and if there is a condition that we probably will encounter later in the life, we probably can also change our route, right? So that forms the basis of the next generation of medicine called Medicine 3.0, wherein we can predict diseases and prevent them. So rather than falling sick and treating them, there is a possibility for us to predict and prevent them, right? So most of us might be going for the annual health checkups, etc., right? But the problem with the annual health checkups is that they can't predict anything. They can detect things when it's there. For example, a mammograph can detect a lump in the breast, or a chest MRI can, or a chest X-ray can probably find a problem with the lungs, right? But it cannot predict anything. Now, if we had ways of looking at the DNA, then we probably can predict many of these diseases. And there have been many companies who have been in the business of prediction using DNA as an analyte, right? And then they also give you these reports wherein they give you certain risk scores. So they categorize into average risk, moderate risk, high risk, etc. But the problem with this kind of reports are that these are not clinically actionable. So if I take a report like this and go to a clinician and say, hey, look, I have an average risk of getting, let's say, a cardiomyopathy, what is that doctor going to do? Right? Average as compared to who? Right? The reason why they are able to only give this kind of risk scores is because they use a statistical method called polygenic risk score. It's been widely adapted by these kind of companies, wherein they take a set of DNA markers which are known to be associated with certain conditions, and they look for the presence of those markers in your DNA and calculate a combined score and say, hey, look, there is an 80% chance that you will get something, right? But then the problem here is that they have low sensitivity, which means more than 60% of the people who have a risk will not be detected by this, which is large false negatives, which is very dangerous, right? And they also have low specificity, which means even when I don't have a risk, it probably sometimes give a false positive risk and say that, hey, look, you have a condition which can lead to, let's say, prostate cancer, right? So that will unnecessarily give me those tensions and stress, right? Now, this result can also vary between ethnicities. So if I look at DNA from, let's say, Caucasian population versus African population, you may not get the right these scores. The scores will vary. So we've been thinking if this is the case, then how do we really harness the hidden gems that are there in the DNA, and then how do you prevent a disease, right? Now, for doing that, you need to have something called as an absolute genetic risk prediction. You should be able to see and pinpoint a genetic error and say, hey, look, because of this particular genetic error, there is a chance of getting prostate cancer, rather than saying that, hey, you have a more than average risk of getting prostate cancer. So for doing that, we started using DNA sequencing as a technology, and we built a lot of machine learning and artificial intelligence algorithms on top of that, which can pinpoint those DNA mutations and say that this is the error or risk that you have. Now, using this, we launched our first product called HealthString, and our company is called SugarStrings.ai. And this is by far the most comprehensive and clinical grade genetic risk prediction test available in the world. This could be your first step in defense against life-limiting diseases. We call it the first step because once we know that there is a risk then you have to take other steps to mitigate that. Right? But just knowing that and then sitting quiet around it doesn't help us. So in our current version of the test, we cover about 100 different cancers and cancer syndromes which can cause cancer. We look at about 105 heart diseases that can lead to a sudden heart attack or sudden death. And in addition to that, we also screen for about 6,000 other genetic diseases, because in our test, we do a comprehensive analysis of the DNA wherein we look at the DNA from one end to the other. So when we do that, in addition to the cancers and heart conditions, we can also find other risk factors. So we report that. And how do we help the clinician to treat the patient better, or using drugs? So for that, we also look at the drug reactions of that individual for about 300 commonly administered drugs, starting from pantoprazole to chemotherapy drugs. Now, how have we achieved here? So the conventional methods wherein they just look at a database, wherein if they get a hit, they calculate that score, and if they don't get a hit, they can give you a report. And the biggest problem, like I mentioned, is high false negatives, wherein 60% of them who has a risk will never be told that they have a risk, right? Now, by using machine learning and deep learning, we have reached a stage wherein with 98.57% accuracy, we can pinpoint those disease-causing mutations. Now, so this is a work in progress for the last 4 years, wherein we have really worked with real patient data. We run these algorithms on real patients, and we validate what we can predict and what we cannot before we launch the test. And we use all the international guidelines that are required for reporting, so that ours becomes a clinical grade report. So comparing with what is our test versus what is available there. So first of all, it's the clinical grade, whereas most of the other things that I showed earlier, they're not clinical grade, which means the clinicians won't accept it. It gives an absolute risk, whereas as opposed to a relative risk score. We decode the DNA end to end instead of looking at certain markers here and there. We have got 100% specificity, which means if I say, hey, there is a mutation which can cause this, that's 100% sure, right? It's not, going to be any gray area over there. It's got over 95% sensitivity. So we are saying 95% sensitivity for it's a very technical thing in the background, wherein there are different type of DNA errors, right? So we look for about 3 or 4 of those types, and there are also certain vague things which we cannot detect using this technology that we're using at the moment. So and we know that 5% of the disease causation can be because of those kind of errors, which is not covered by the test. There are doctors who are referring these tests for family members or patients who have been detected with certain conditions. But whereas the other things are not being accepted by the clinicians. I'm giving you a couple of live examples of what we have detected. So these are all from real life individuals. So there was this one individual who was detected with something called as a Brugada syndrome mutation. Now, Brugada syndrome is a heart condition wherein the heart rhythm is very fast, which means the heart will start beating really fast when it's been triggered with certain medications, etc., and becomes so fast that the heart can fail, right? And it forms one of the major reason for sudden nocturnal death syndrome, wherein the person just dies in the sleep. And we've been hearing about this of late, wherein a very healthy looking person go to sleep and then he doesn't wake up. And the mean age of death with Brugada syndrome is 40 years, although there are also infantile cases wherein infants can die because of Brugada syndrome, but then the mean age is about 40 years. And the beauty here is that if somebody knew that they had that condition, there are ways of preventing them. So the first one is an implantable cardioverter defibrillator, which is like a pacemaker, which can be implanted into the person so that it normalizes the rhythm, so that they will not get the heart attack. They also have to monitor their heart through EKG every 1 to 2 years. And there are tons of substances and circumstances they have to avoid. There are substances like cocaine, which can increase the heart rhythm and then trigger it. There are multiple antidepressants that can trigger it. So there are multiple reasons why agents that one need to avoid if they have a risk, and they will be able to take this action only if they know that they have a condition. Now, this particular thing comes from a 5-year-old girl, and we were able to identify the mutation. I'll also take another example of a cancer, again from a gentleman from Bangalore. So Lynch syndrome is one of the major risk factor for colon cancer, right? So if the population's risk for colon cancer is only 4 to 5%, if one has got Lynch syndrome, the risk goes up to 70 to 80%. Now, that can also lead to endometrial cancer in women, wherein the risk increases to 40 to 60%. And there are multiple other cancers that are being linked with Lynch syndrome. Now, once somebody knows that they have Lynch syndrome, what the NCCN, which is the National Cancer Network in the US, suggests is that they should start colonoscopies from the age of 20, whereas the general population's recommendations is after 50 years. So they have to start from 20 years onwards, they have to start colonoscopy and pick up any of those polyps which may have started developed, and then they need to remove them. But then there are other, prophylactic surgeries such as removing the colon, depending on which mutation, where it is, etc. Or for women, removing the uterus and ovaries after the reproductive age, which is recommended. And also maintaining the healthy lifestyle, which includes regular exercise, better diet, etc., etc. Now, I also want to show you how by doing genetic tests, one can really pinpoint things and diagnose things and take things better. So this is from a really large, famous study from the US, wherein they looked at the clinical diagnosis of various types of heart conditions. So a clinician had put them into multiple things, which is your dilated cardiomyopathies, hypertrophic cardiomyopathies, etc. But by just doing a genetic test, things became much more resolved, right? And when we get that kind of a resolution, the action becomes more precise. So it's not that they're just trying to look at a heart condition and say, hey, because of cholesterol, because cholesterol is always called in by the body when there is inflammation. But then once you have done a genetic test, you can see that it can be multiple different reasons why the individual has got that condition, and then the precise things can be taken. Now, the reason why I'm showing this slide, although this is not really directly linked to HealthString, because HealthString is a preventive thing, I showed this because the engines that we have running for HealthString in the background is also been used for our diagnostic wing. So we have a diagnostic wing wherein we pick up samples from patients and doctors and hospitals, and the same engine works in the background, which means what we find in HealthString is as good as a diagnostic report, right? So even if somebody does not use it for today, if there is a incidence later and if they have to go to a doctor, they can actually show that report, and the doctor exactly know what is what. Now, by doing this, what are we trying to achieve? So there are two things. One, how do we increase the life expectancy? How do we avoid this premature deaths because of heart attacks and cancers, etc.? Wherein people in their prime 40s and 50s want to live more. That's a time when they have started having the resources and time to enjoy life. So we don't want to cut that short. Like, how do we extend that? And second, when we extend that, how do we make sure that they have a larger number of good years of good health rather than having living with a condition? That's the whole ethos with which we are working. And therefore, don't wait for symptoms, take HealthString. And taking the test is a really simple method wherein you can come to our website and order the test from the website, and then we will send you this sample collection kit to your address. And when you open that, there is a simple cheek swab collection device, something like the COVID test swab, which we're all aware of. So you can just scrape against your inner cheek, put it into a solution which is there in a tube, and register the kit on our website, and we will collect it back to our laboratory, do the whole analysis, and give you a report within about 30 days time. And post the report generation, we'll also have a one-on-one genetic counseling session, again, a virtual session, wherein we will explain the report and then the possible action to be taken going further. So yeah, so that's as simple as that. Thank you.